Welcome to a very special Heatherfield Heritage video. Today I'm going to be reading a story for someone who can't be home for Christmas, but I hope you'll enjoy it too. So get comfortable, and I'll begin. Of course you must understand that Grey Rabbit's home had no electric light or gas, and even the candles were made from the pith of rushes dipped in wax from the wild bee's nest which Squirrel found. Water there was in plenty, but it did not come from a tap. It flowed from a spring outside, which rose up from the ground and went to a brook. Grey Rabbit cooked on a fire, but it was a wood fire, and there was no coal in that part of the country. Tea did not come from India, but from a little herb known very well to country people, who once dried it and used it in their cottage homes. Bread was baked from wheat ears, ground fine, and Hare and Little Grey Rabbit gleaned the cornfields to get wheat. The doormats were plaited rushes, like country-made mats, and cushions were stuffed with wool gathered from the hedges where sheep had pushed through the thorns. As for the looking-glass, Grey Rabbit found the glass, dropped from a lady's handbag, and Mole made a frame for it. Usually the animals gazed at themselves in still pools that so many country children have done. The country ways of Grey Rabbit were the country ways known to the author. It had been snowing for hours. The trees and hedges were covered with winter wraps, and the fields were hidden under thick blankets. Hare stood in the garden of the little house at the end of the wood, watching the snowflakes which came softly tumbling down from the grey sky, dropping like white feathers. His paws were outstretched, his head uplifted, and his mouth wide open. His fur was sprinkled with snow, so that he looked like a white hare from the icy north. Every now and then he caught an extra-large flake and ate it with relish. "Whatever are you doing, Hare?" cried Squirrel, who sat close to the fire. "Come in, you'll catch cold." "I am catching cold, and eating it too," replied Hare happily. "Hare! How long do you think she will be? Can you see her coming?" called Squirrel again. Hare turned his head slowly to the door. "Did you speak, Squirrel, or did you merely squeak?" he asked. "I speaked," said Squirrel indignantly. "I mean to say, I spoke. Where is Little Grey Rabbit?" "She's at the market, buying Christmas fare for all of us," replied Hare, and he caught an extra-large snowflake on his red tongue. "I think she is choosing something special for me. I want barley sugar, peppermint rock, a music box." As he spoke, a small, stout animal came trudging up the lane, laden with a heavy basket and a string bag bulging with knobs. Straggling behind was a little snow-covered creature. "There she is!" cried Hare, leaping forward. "Make the tea, Squirrel!" He ran down the path and then stopped, disappointed. "It's only Mrs. Hedgehog," he muttered. "And Fuzzy Peg," he added as he recognised the little fellow. "Yes, it's only me," grunted Mrs. Hedgehog wearily, as she shook the snow from her cape. "And me," piped Fuzzy Peg. "Have you seen Little Grey Rabbit?" asked Hare as he leaned over the gate. Mrs. Hedgehog rested her burden on the snow and wiped her face. "I have indeed. She was at the market along of me. Then she went to talk to old Joe the carpenter." "What did she want with Joe?" asked Hare. "She went inside his shed, and I hurried away, for I had to get my Christmas fairings. The market was thronged with folk, all buying as fast as they could. I didn't wait for Little Grey Rabbit." "Please, sir," cried little Fuzzy Peg, "I know, sir. I knows what Little Grey Rabbit went to the carpenter for, Miss Hare. It was for—" "Shh!" Mrs. Hedgehog shook her head at her son. "You mustn't let the cat out of the bag. Miss Grey Rabbit wouldn't like it." Hare looked alarmed, but Mrs. Hedgehog picked up her basket. "I must be getting along, or my old man won't get his apple dumplings for tea," she said, and away she went, with little Fuzzy Peg protesting. "There wasn't a cat in the bag, mother. There wasn't." It was growing dark when Squirrel and Hare heard the sounds of merry voices and the ringing of bells in the lane. They ran to the door, and what should they see but a fine scarlet sledge drawn by 2 young rabbits, and Little Grey Rabbit herself sitting cosily on the top. Her warm tippet was round her shoulders, and her parcels alongside. The sledge stopped at the door, and Grey Rabbit sprang off and curtsied to her astonished friends. "That's a fine contraption," exclaimed Hare admiringly. "Where did you hire it?" "Oh, Grey Rabbit, what a lovely cart!" cried Squirrel. She rubbed her paws over the smooth sides and peered at the holly leaves which adorned the sledge. "Grey Rabbit, our names are on it!" shouted Hare. He pointed excitedly to the words Squirrel, Hare, and Little Grey Rabbit, written in flowing rabbity letters around the sides. "It's ours! It says so!" "Yes, it is our very own," answered Grey Rabbit. "I ordered it from Joe Carpenter, but I had to wait for the paint to dry. These kind rabbits insisted on bringing me home on it. We will go out sledging tomorrow." The two rabbits stamped their feet to rid them of snow, and Little Grey Rabbit gathered up her parcels. "Come inside and have a glass of primrose wine," she invited them, and they stepped shyly after her. Squirrel fetched the yellow wine, and Grey Rabbit took a couple of acorn glasses from the cupboard. Hare remained at the door, murmuring to himself, "It's just what I wanted. The very thing for me. If anyone had said to me, 'Hare, old chap, what would you like best in all the world?' I should answer, 'A scarlet-coloured sledge.'" "With bells on it," added Squirrel, who overheard him. "And our names on the side," continued Hare dreamily. "A Merry Christmas when it comes," said the two rabbits, raising their glasses to Little Grey Rabbit. "The same to you and many of them," replied Grey Rabbit. They drank the flower-tasting wine, and then ran off down the lane to their home to tell their mother all about the fine sledge. Grey Rabbit untied her parcels and put away her groceries. Some little packets she hid, but Squirrel and Hare were too busy wiping the snow from the new sledge and examining the runners to pay any heed to Grey Rabbit and her secrets. After breakfast the next day, they set off. Squirrel and Little Grey Rabbit sat on the sledge, and Hare pulled them over the field. "I'm the strongest and the swiftest," said he. He raced across the frozen ground, the scarlet sledge gliding smoothly after him, for the two little animals were very light. They came to their favourite hill. Hare mounted behind them and stretched out his long legs to guide them. "1 to be ready, 2 to be steady, 3 to be off!" he cried, and away they went down the steep slope, shouting with excitement, clinging to one another as the sledge gathered speed. It flew like a streak of lightning. "Woo!" cried Hare breathlessly. "What a speed! What an express train! Whoops! Whoa! Whoa, mare!" But the sledge wouldn't stop. At last it struck a molehill, and over they all toppled, little furry bodies tumbling head over heels. "Where am I?" asked Squirrel faintly. "In a goose-feather bed," laughed Grey Rabbit, shaking herself. 60 miles an hour, cried Hare, sitting up and rubbing his elbow. "We went faster than a March hare." "With a fox after him," added Squirrel rather tactlessly. Little Fuzzypeg, carrying a slice of bread and jam for his lunch, came to watch the fun. This was the hill down which he had rolled his birthday eggs. He stared at the three dragging their pretty sledge up the slope, and he longed to join them. "I want to toboggan," said he softly, but nobody heard. Squirrel, Hare, and Little Grey Rabbit settled themselves on the seat and started on another journey. "Look at me, toboggan! Watch me!" cried Fuzzypeg. He made himself into a ball and rolled down the hill, faster and faster. When he got to the bottom, there was no Fuzzypeg to be seen, only an enormous snowball. "What a big snowball!" cried Squirrel, climbing off the sledge and shaking her dress as the snowball bumped alongside. "What a beauty!" exclaimed Grey Rabbit admiringly. "Help! Help!" squeaked a tiny muffled voice. "Come here!" "What's that?" cried Squirrel, startled. "I thought I heard a sound." "Help! Help!" piped Little Fuzzypeg faintly. "That's a talking snowball," explained Hare, leaning over the great ball. "Isn't it interesting? Has anyone ever seen a snowball that could talk? I don't expect even Wise Owl, for all his cleverness, has seen such a thing. Isn't it a curiosity? I'll take it home and keep it in the garden." He dragged the large ball onto the sledge and pulled the load uphill. Squirrel and Grey Rabbit wondered where the snowball had come from, and whether the Snow Queen had dropped it from the clouds. When they reached the top, Hare rolled the ball to the ground and gave it a kick. "Ah!" he cried, limping. "There's a thorn inside!" "Help! Help! Help!" shrieked the tiny faraway voice indignantly. "Let me out!" That's like Fuzzy Peg's voice," said Grey Rabbit with a puzzled frown, and she bent over and loosened the cake snow. Out came the little hedgehog, eating his bread and jam. "However did you get inside a snowball?" asked Hare, who was most disappointed at this discovery.
"I didn't get inside. It got round me,"
replied Fuzzy Peg calmly.
"Can I go on your sledge now?"
"Hare will take you," promised Little Grey Rabbit. "There won't be room for all of us with your needles and pins." Hare took the little hedgehog for a ride, but when Fuzzy Peg flung his arms round Hare's waist, he sprang shrieking away. "That's enough," said he severely. "My motto is, never go hedging with a sledgehog. I mean to say," he corrected himself hastily, "never go sledging with a hedgehog. You must ride alone, young fellow." Fuzzy Peg ran home and returned with a tea tray. After him came a crowd of rabbits, each carrying a tray, and they all rode helter-skelter down the slope, shouting and laughing as they tried to outrace each other. Squirrel, Hare, and Little Grey Rabbit took their sledge to Mouldy Warp's house. The holly trees were ablaze with red berries, and Squirrel ran up the trees and gathered some sprays. Mole came out to show them the lovely pale branches of mistletoe growing on an oak tree. He helped to tie down the bundle of berries when the three friends had gathered all they needed. He pointed out some of the beauties of the snowy wood, the crystal ice caverns where icicles hung like spears, the snow garden with glittering white flowers, the ice bridges which spanned the ditches, the snow castles with towers, all made by Jack Frost, the clever smith from the North Pole. Then he said goodbye, for it was Christmas Eve, and everyone had work to do in preparation for the day. Hare shut the sledge in the woodshed and carried the holly and mistletoe indoors. He began to decorate the room, helped by the nimble squirrel. Little Grey Rabbit stood at the table, her cooking apron wrapped around her, making mince pies. "Is that right, Grey Rabbit? Shall we hang some holly here?" asked Hare, as Squirrel popped sprigs over the corner cupboard, and round the warming pan, and among the mugs on the dresser. Little Grey Rabbit looked up from the tin patty pans and waved her rolling pin to direct operations. The fire crackled in the chimney, sweet smells filled the kitchen, the scent of burning logs, the smell of dried lavender which hung from the ceiling, and the fragrance of the green holly which Hare carried. The silver moon shone down on the white fields, making them glitter with a strange and beautiful light. The stars twinkled in the frosty air, and now and then a shooting star left a track of gold across the heavens. Up the lane came a little company, carrying rolls of music and pipes of straw. Their tiny feet made crackles in the snow, and they talked softly as they walked up to the closed door of Grey Rabbit's house. They arranged themselves in a circle, then coughed and cleared their husky throats, and held up their music to the moonlight. "You strike up first, Brush," said one of the rabbits. "Your voice is the powerfulest." "No, it ain't," said Brush, a hoary old hedgehog whose bristles were as thick as a broomhead. "I'm hoarse as a crow. You start, Milkman Hedgehog." "Not me," cried Hedgehog, shaking his head. "I've lost my top notes, and my bottom ones too. I can't start."
"Let me!"
interrupted Fuzzy Peg, but his father nudged him. "You wait till you're axed, and let your elders and betters sing first," said he sternly. "Now then, all together!" cried an important-looking rabbit, playing a note on his straw pipe. 1, 2, 3! And with their noses in the air, the company began to sing in small, squeaky voices this Christmas carol. Holly red and mistletoe white, the stars are shining with golden light, burning like candles this holy night, holly red and mistletoe white. Mistletoe white and holly red, the doors are shut and the children abed, fairies at foot and angels at head, mistletoe white and holly red. "Hush! What's that noise?" cried Hare, dropping his mistletoe and listening. "Is it a wolf howling at the door?" "Or is it the wind crying through the keyhole?" asked Squirrel, springing down from the chair back. "It's the weights," said Little Grey Rabbit, and she held up her wooden spoon. They flung wide the door and saw the little group of rabbits and hedgehogs peering at their sheets of music. Come in, cried Grey Rabbit. "Come and sing by the fireside. You look frozen with the cold." "We're all right," answered Brush, "but a warm drink would wet our whistles. Some of us have lost our voices on the way here." "So I thought," whispered Hare to Squirrel. Grey Rabbit took from the fire the two-handled Christmas mug of mulled primrose wine, and the carolers passed it round. Even little Fuzzy Peg got a sip, and tasted the primroses of other years. "That's better," sighed old Hedgehog. "Thank ye kindly. Now we shan't be so hoarse. I tell ye, my voice was like a key turning in a rusty lock." They stood by the fire and sang all the songs they knew, such as "The Moon Shines Bright," and "I Saw 3 Ships a-Sailing," and "Green Grows the Holly." "Now we must be off," said they, when Little Grey Rabbit had given them hot mince pies. "We have to sing at all the rabbit houses on the common. Good night, the compliments of the season, happy Christmas, and many of them." "The same to you," replied Hare politely, and he opened the door. Squirrel and Grey Rabbit stood by him, watching the waits as they took the field path, listening to the carol Holly Red and Mistletoe White, which the animals sang as they trotted along. "I think I shall take the sledge and toboggan down the hill by moonlight," said Hare, looking up at the round moon, which made the land bright as day. "I might see something of Santa Claus and his reindeer." He wrapped a muffler round his neck, seized the cord of the sledge, and ran across the fields to the hill. Everything looked different in the white moonbeams. The ice crackled, the stars sparkled blue and green, and winked at the excited Hare. Again and again he rushed down the hill, his eyes on the lovely moon. Suddenly he noticed a dark shadow running alongside. It was his own moon shadow, but Hare saw the long ears and round head of a strange monster. "Oh dear, oh dear! Who is that dusky fellow racing by my side?" he cried. He took to his heels, leaving the sledge lying in the field, and away he went as fast as he could, running from his own long shadow. He listened a moment, expecting to hear pounding feet, but there was only the to-wit-to-woo of Wise Owl somewhere in the wood, and the frightened Hare hurried home. "Did you come without the sledge?" asked Squirrel indignantly. "Hare, you are a coward. I don't believe there was anybody at all. You ran away from your shadow. You've lost our lovely sledge." "Better than losing my lovely life," retorted Hare. He felt rather miserable. He wished he had stopped to look at the dusky creature which chased him. Shadows were good companions, and he had run away and deserted the scarlet sledge. "I suppose we'd better go to bed," he muttered. "Don't suppose there'll be any presents tomorrow. I don't think Santa Claus will find this house with so much snow about." He went upstairs gloomily, but he hung his furry stocking all the same, and so did Squirrel. When all was quiet, Grey Rabbit crept out of her room and peeped at Hare lying fast asleep. Then she looked at Squirrel, whose tail was curled over her eyes. She ran back to her own room. Under the bed was a store of parcels. She opened them and filled the stockings with sugar plums and lollipops, and placed little gifts at the foot of each bed. Then she ran downstairs to the kitchen, where the dying fire flickered softly. She tied together little sprays of holly and made a round ball called Kissing Bunch. She decked it with scarlet crab-apples and gilded nuts, all dangling among the glossy green leaves. Then she hung it from the hook in the ceiling. "Won't they be surprised?" she chuckled to herself, and she tiptoed round the floor, putting the finishing touches to the scene. On Christmas morning, Grey Rabbit was so sleepy she didn't wake till Hare burst in on her room. "Grey Rabbit! Merry Christmas! Grey Rabbit!" "Merry Christmas, Hare," murmured the little rabbit. "Grey Rabbit! He's been! Wake up! He's been in the night!" "Who?" cried Grey Rabbit, rubbing her eyes and sitting up in fright. "Who? Has Rat been?" "Santa Claus!" cried Hare, capering up and down by her bed. "Be quick and come downstairs and see the surprises." Grey Rabbit dressed hurriedly, but there was a little twinkle in her eyes as she entered the room. "Look what he brought me!" cried Squirrel, holding out a pair of fur mittens and bedroom slippers made from sheep's wool. "And he gave me a spotted handkerchief and a musical box!" cried Hare excitedly. And he turned the handle of the little round box, from which came a jolly tune which set their feet dancing. "Look at the kissing bunch," Hare went on. "Isn't it lovely? Let's all kiss under it." So they gave their Christmas morning kisses under the round Christmas bunch in the time-honoured way. Robin the postman flew to the door with some Christmas cards and a letter. The little bird rested and ate some breakfast while Hare examined the leaf with its tiny pointed scribble. "It's from Mole," said he, twisting it over and over. "Yes, I know," replied Robin. "Mole gave it to me." "You're reading it upside down, Hare," cried Squirrel impatiently. She took the little letter and read the scrawl. "Come tonight. Love from Mouldiwarp." "It's a party!" cried Hare. "Quick, Grey Rabbit, write and say we'll all be there, and we hope there'll be plenty to eat." Grey Rabbit sat at her desk and wrote in careful letters on an ivy leaf, "Thank you, dear Mouldiwarp." Then away flew the robin with the leaf in his bag. "Let us take some mince pies to Mouldiwarp," said Grey Rabbit. "And my last year's spotted handkerchief," said Hare. "I've got a new one now, and nobody ever wants two except a mole who lives underground and gets dirty." All day they enjoyed themselves, playing musical chairs to the tunes in Hare's musical box, pulling the tiny crackers from the gorse bush, crunching the lollipops. Grey Rabbit read aloud the story of Cinderella. Squirrel sang a carol, and Hare did some conjuring tricks, hiding things under his handkerchief and finding them again. They all trooped to the hill to look for the sledge, but it wasn't there. Snow had covered all the traces of footprints. "Santa Claus has borrowed it," Grey Rabbit consoled Hare. "When the snow melts, we shall find it." The first star appeared in the sky, and the three animals wrapped themselves up in warm clothes and started for the mole's house. In their baskets they had presents for the lonely mole, and some of their own Christmas fare. "What a pity you lost our beautiful sledge! We could have ridden on it tonight," said Squirrel to Hare. Hare hung his head. He wished she wouldn't talk about it so much. When the three got near Mole's house, they saw something glittering. A lighted tree grew by the path, like a burning beacon. "Oh dear! Something's on fire!" cried Hare. "Let's put it out! Climb up and blow it out, Squirrel!" "Hush!" whispered Grey Rabbit. "It's a magical tree, a tree from fairyland growing in our wood." On every branch of the little fir tree candles wavered their tongues of flame. Little red and gold fruits hung from the tips of the boughs. On the ground under the branches were bowls of hazelnuts, round loaves of barley bread, piles of wheaten cakes, small sacks of corn, and platters of berries. There were jars of honey as big as thimbles, and bottles of heather ale as big as acorns. Icicles and hailstones shone like diamonds among the branches. Brightly coloured feathers and shells were fastened to the bark, and chains of frozen water drops swung to and fro, reflecting the candlelight. Through the tip-top of this wonderful tree gleamed the Christmas star. "What do you think of my tree?" asked Mouldiwarp, stepping out of the shadows. "It's beautiful," they murmured. "It's not a rose tree, nor a holly tree, nor an apple tree. Is it a fairy tree, Mole?" asked Grey Rabbit. "It's a Christmas tree," replied Mole in his soft, mysterious voice. "It's for all the birds and beasts of the woods and fields. They will see it from afar and come here. Now sit quietly and watch." Across the snowy fields padded little dark creatures, all filled with curiosity to see the glowing lights in the tree. Some were thin, and some were lame, and many were poor, for it had been a hard winter. With them romped the gay little rabbits, the squirrels and the field mice. The family of Milkman Hedgehog trudged through the snowdrifts. The carolers and market people were there, and Water Rat with his brown velvet coat. Even Wise Owl flew down to see what was the matter, and Rat with his wife and baby stood on the edge of the crowd. "Help yourselves!" cried Mole, waving his short arms. "It is Christmas! Eat and drink and warm yourselves. Take away as much as you want for your storerooms." Then every little creature ate the good food, and drank the sweet honeyed ale, and carried away little bags and baskets of meal and cakes and corn. The birds filled their knapsacks, the squirrels filled their pockets. When they had finished, there was nothing left except for the glowing candles which the wind could not extinguish. Mole had made them himself down underground, where he kept his stores. From behind a tree, Rat sidled towards Grey Rabbit and touched his hat. "Miss Grey Rabbit," said he, "a word in your ear. I found a scarlet sledge in the field last night, and my missus read your family name on it, so I took the liberty of bringing it here for you." "Oh, thank you, kind Rat," cried Grey Rabbit, clapping her paws in delight. "My missus helped me drag it along," added Rat. He took Grey Rabbit to the sledge, and then without waiting for more, he hurried away to his family, who peeped round the corner. "The sledge is found! Come, Hare, Squirrel, Mouldiwarp, Wise Owl, come and see our sledge," called Grey Rabbit, and everyone crowded round to admire it. The little scarlet sledge was clean and bright, for Rat had rubbed the snow away. On the top was a fleecy shawl covering something, and Grey Rabbit drew from under it 3 objects, which he held up wonderingly. The first was a walking stick, made of peeled holly wood, polished like ivory, and the handle was carved in the shape of a hare. "That must be for me from good Santa Claus," said Hare, seizing it and swinging it about his head. The second was a little wooden spoon with a hazelnut carved into the handle. "That is certainly mine," said Squirrel, and she put it in her pocket. The third was a wee bone box, hanging on a string of berries, and when Grey Rabbit unfastened the lid, there was a little white thimble inside which exactly fitted her. "And I've never had a thimble since Wise Owl swallowed mine," said Grey Rabbit happily. "Good Santa Claus!" cried Hare. "He knew what we wanted. He has brought back our sledge filled with these things for us." "Only one person could make such delicate carvings," said Grey Rabbit. "And that is Rat," said Squirrel. "They are peace offerings," suggested Mole. "For Christmastide," added old Hedgehog wisely.
"3 cheers for Rat!"
cried Fuzzy Peg, and they all cheered. "Hip hip, hurrah!" "3 cheers for Mouldiwarp!" shouted Hare, and he waved his walking stick and led the loud cheering. Squirrel and Grey Rabbit climbed on the sledge, and Hare drew them over the snow. "Good night! A happy Christmas!" they called as they left their friend behind. "Same to you," answered Mouldiwarp and Water Rat. The Hedgehog family waved and shouted, "Merry, Merry Christmas, Grey Rabbit!" "To-it-to-woo, Merry Christmas to you!" hooted Wise Owl as he sailed overhead, and flew across the wood to his own home in the beech tree. There could be no hunting for him on Christmas Day, but Mole's feast had helped him over the difficulty. The sledge caught up with a little band of carolers, who sang as they marched along the lane. Their voices came clear and silvery through the air, and this is what Grey Rabbit heard. "Holly red and mistletoe white, peace on earth and mercy bright, a truce by the tree of candlelight, holly red and mistletoe white. Mistletoe white and holly red, the day is over, we're off to bed, tired body and sleepy head, mistletoe white and holly red." "Hey ho, I'm sleepy too," murmured Squirrel, "but it has been lovely. Thank you, Grey Rabbit, and Mouldiwarp, and Rat, and everyone for a happy day." She curled down under the fleecy shawl by Grey Rabbit's side and clutched her wooden spoon. Grey Rabbit sat wide awake on the swaying sledge. Her thimble was on her finger, and her eyes shone with happiness. "Peace on earth and mercy bright," her heart sang, and Hare ran swiftly over the frozen snow, drawing the little scarlet-coloured sledge towards the little house at the end of the wood. Thank you for joining me for Little Grey Rabbit's Christmas. From everyone at Heatherfield Heritage, we wish you a very Merry Christmas and the happiest of New Years. Especially you, Dad. Merry Christmas.